chance to ask questions of ministers at that press conference, and yesterday Reverend Martin Poole from Brighton was not prepared to go along with the idea that this somehow would lead to ministers receiving patsy questions.
Will the government review all penalty fines imposed on families travelling for childcare purposes during lockdown? Thanks.
The inference from that question being that if Dominic Cummings broke the rules, why should ordinary members of the public be fined for breaking the same rules? Health Secretary Matt Hancock was flummoxed.
And so I think, especially coming from a man of the cloth, I think that is perfectly reasonable to take away that question. I'll have to talk to my Treasury colleagues before I can answer it in full, and we'll look at it. And if we can get your details, we'll make sure that we write to you with a full answer and make an announcement from this podium. I think we can make that commitment.
Within the hour, the Treasury had said there will be no review. We're not reviewing. There'll be no. People won't be given their money back for the fines if they broke the rules for lockdown, and everything remains the same. Matt Hancock there, pretty much humiliated by the Treasury. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson will be appearing in front of MPs at the Liaison Committee later on today, and he will be facing some tough questions from his Conservative colleagues.
Let's just look at this revolt, which we will, just a word before I move on to guests, concerning this idea of returning cash, which I thought would have been pretty difficult anyway. Some of the papers are moving on, some of the papers are not. As you rightly say, we're moving towards 40 MPs now in open revolt. Where do you see this going?
So the critical number is 80, because that's what the Prime Minister's majority is. The problem for Downing Street is the breadth of the anger. It's right across the party. It's not just about the number, 39 being a big number, but it's about the breadth of the anger. And the problem for Boris Johnson is that if he wants to do other things in Parliament, pass legislation, and get his agenda through Parliament, he's going to need those Conservative MPs. He does not want that number of 39 to go any higher.
All right, you're back with more details on that story later in the show, 9 minutes after 7. Let's go back to the idea as floated by the Brighton vicar. It seems to make some sense, but how practical was it? And indeed, if you have suffered a result, if you've been fined and you've suffered financial loss as a result of this, do let me know. This has, and I just need to bring this other aspect in, a report done by the organisation Liberty shows that BAME, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic people in England are 54%, what a strange number, 54% more likely to be fined under coronavirus rules than white people. Analysis by Liberty Investigate shows those figures. Then there's a whole slew of figures there. But just to give it some context, so 54% more likely if you come from that group, that designation. But the population of England, I don't have the United Kingdom to hand, England is 15.5% of the population in England. I think it drops when you put it into the United Kingdom. So there's some imbalance there. So Peter Hughes from the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. And in a way, the laws as they were constituted and what the government was seeking the police to do, was it starting from a very bad start? Good morning to you.
Yes, the regulations are fully put together. The fact is, Nick, there will be people who have not paid their fine yet. We seek to court. There will be people who have paid it when they make complaints of injuries in police forces. So I think the government is going to at least have to issue some guidance.
88% across England as the market reopened earlier this month. Details after the 7:15 LBC News headline. Simon Conway.
Lockdowns could be imposed locally to stop spikes of coronavirus in certain English regions under the NHS Test, Track and Trace system. Senior MPs will question Boris Johnson later over the government's handling of the pandemic, and calls to a domestic abuse helpline have risen by 2/3 since lockdown started. The weather, some patchy rain for northwestern areas, otherwise very warm and sunny, a high of 25 degrees.
Easy travel line to our web in Poplar, very slow again this morning on the Aspen Way westbound to the junction of Preston's Road, and that's because of the roadworks where only one lane is open. Very busy northbound to the Blackwall Tunnel from the Woolwich Road flyover, and delays on the North Circular Road westbound from the A10 Edmonton to Palmer's Green. In Hampton, there are delays on the Hampton Court Road in both directions to Church Street because of the temporary traffic lights.
This is LBC. If you want a career in media, your future starts here. For Global Academy, a unique school recruiting students for Year 10 and Year 12 who want to work in broadcast and digital media.
There's nowhere that really can offer what the Global Academy offers.
We're all here to do the same thing, interested in media, whatever it is you want to do.
The Global Academy, rated good by Ofsted. Get more info and apply now for September 2020. Search Global Academy. Call Nick Ferrari now, 0345 6060 973. This is LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Sheila Fogarty, Monday to Friday from 1 p.m.
All of us in this situation have wanted to feel that we had some control over the safety of ourselves and our families. We really need to know the lie of the land. And if that control is taken away from you, certainly for reasons that don't make sense, then I can see why you're emotional.
LBC with gov.uk business support. Find out the current financial support available for your business.
This is LBC.
If you're a man trying to deal with the dual crisis of facing a divorce as well as the pandemic crisis, this could mean that your income and assets are suddenly depreciated. It's important to act immediately so that any financial orders can consider the revised asset value of future income, allowing you to be able to meet future payments, protecting your financial well-being. At this time, Cordell & Cordell have stepped up their service procedures to bring you the support you need now. CordellCordell.co.uk, a partner men can count on.
We're all juggling a lot at the moment. Take me. I'd normally be making a documentary right now, but at home, I've had to become my parents' questionable IT consultant, a glitchy virtual colleague, and a distinctly average quiz show host. Which is why BT assembled some of the nation's favourite faces for a series of tech how-tos on homeschooling, digital well-being, working from home, online
of anger. The Daily Mirror, fast and furious. This is a picture of Michael Gove, and they feature the interview that Mr. Gove had with us on the show yesterday, where he said he sometimes tests his eyesight by driving. I really wouldn't recommend it. Next thing is that Stevie Wonder would be an Uber driver, and then you'd really be in trouble, wouldn't you? As I really wouldn't do that. Then also the front page of The Guardian continues to be the Cummings story. Not surprised really there. Here's the Express trying to change the agenda a little bit. Drug boosts virus survival hopes. A lot of doing words in that headline. We're looking at that story in just a moment. This is the drug I just mentioned, remdesivir, if I'm saying it correctly. But here's the Times still going. PM suffers pulse slump. Cummings revolt grows. There's the Eye. Public backlash over support for Cummings. And there's the Daily Telegraph. Tories revolt as voters turn on Cummings. So having voodoo on there. Let's pick up on that. Julia is in Herne Hill. What about the idea of trying to return cash to these people who've been fined? Julia, good morning.
Well, I think I'm absolutely splitting feathers. I'm not very much on the fine. What I'm so annoyed about is this Cummings affair is so predictable. Whenever we come up to a Brexit deadline, all the old culprits come out and say, well, they don't like Cummings because he's banging heads together.
They don't like him because in their eyes, and it's difficult really to argue with that, he broke the law. He says he didn't, but...
Well, I don't know. They have a part in the law where they talk about if you have a dependent, you can...
Yes, I think yesterday, Julia, we probably could... a lot of us could go with the idea you're going to drive to a farm where your child can be looked after by nieces, but to take a 40-minute drive to check your eyesight, Julia, that's where it falls apart, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know. My eyesight alters with hay fever, I must admit. So,
Right.
I mean, what I'm annoyed about is they're hounding this man, nitpicking.
No, Julia, he's the author of his misfortune. Had he not taken that drive, no one would care. No one would know.
But they wouldn't be hounding him.
No, they wouldn't, because he wouldn't appear to have broken lockdown, and certainly a questionable practice of testing your eyesight by driving your family around for 40
Of
minutes.
breaking lockdown every day of the week. And the thing is, this man is banging heads together and he's trying to give us a decent Brexit. If we lose this man, we'll lose Brexit.
Well, let's see if that's right. As you say, there is an important deadline approaching in just over a month's time. You're absolutely right. That has obviously taken a backseat recently. Julia, thank you. And we will return to this conversation in just a moment. Right, I mentioned this story, and indeed it's the front page of one of your newspapers, the Daily Express. A drug treatment called remdesivir appearing to shorten recovery time for people with the virus. Health Secretary Matt Hancock speaking yesterday.
Today I can announce that we're beginning a new trial for selected NHS patients of an antiviral drug called remdesivir. There have already been some promising early results on coronavirus patients, with early data suggesting it can shorten recovery time by around 4 days. As you can understand, we'll be prioritising the use of this treatment where it will provide the greatest benefit. This is probably the biggest step forward in the treatment of coronavirus since the crisis began.
All right, well, that's what a politician says. Let's speak to someone who's in a position to give us more detail. Dr. Stephen Griffin is Associate Professor at the University of Leeds School of Medicine. And I seem to recall this drug, if I've got the right one, Doctor, being mentioned a few weeks ago. Is this the drug that was used in treatment against Ebola? Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, that's correct. This has been used in trials to treat Ebola before. Yes, that's right.
Politicians are getting very excited. You're an expert in this field. Is it a game changer?
It's certainly one of the best assets that we have available to treat coronavirus at the moment. It's one of the few drugs where early trials have been overall very positive in terms of its ability to reduce the severity of disease and to speed people's recovery. So in that sense, then yes, it's very, very important and could be useful particularly in treating people that have very severe disease.
How does it work, in layman's terms, how does it work, Dr. Griffin?
Well, it attacks vital aspects of the virus's own replication machinery. So the proteins that it uses to copy new versions of its genome within the cells that it infects, there's a specific protein that does that. This drug mimics the building blocks that particular enzyme uses, and if the enzyme takes this drug into the new genome, it prevents that from being functional. So it slows the virus down and therefore allows our immune systems to get on top of the infection.
Briefly, do you suppose it's a magic bullet, Doctor?
It has limitations in its use. It needs to be used intravenously. It's certainly not something that we could give out in widespread communities for that reason. I don't think it's a magic bullet. It has a difficult job to do because we give the drug once the infection's already quite severe and established in patients. And the best we can hope for in that circumstance is to prevent those severe forms of disease. So that's what this drug will hopefully be useful for, and that's why it's been rolled out on this early access program.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Stephen Griffin, Associate Professor at the University of Leeds School of Medicine. Back to our conversation about those fines and, of course, the problems that the Prime Minister finds himself with his continued support for Dominic Cummings. 7:27. But should we focus on some good news when we can? Because the country needs to get back to work, as I have said time after time after time. The children should be back in school on June the 1st this Monday, providing it's safe, and not if they have underlying health issues, and teachers if they have underlying health issues. Of course they shouldn't return. But where we can, should we focus on stories that are moving the country on? And here's a good one. House hunter demand jumping by 88% across England as the market reopened earlier this month. These figures come from Zoopla, and they talk about a weekly increase between May 12 and May 19. That's the research. What's the reality? David Gallman is Sales Director of Galliard Homes, regularly helps us with matters relating to this sector, and joins me now. You're on the front line, you and your colleagues selling houses for Galliard Homes. Is it true, David? Good morning.
I don't know about the actual numbers. Morning, Nick. How are you?
Yeah, good, sir. Thank you. I trust you're well and everybody came through. Buddy?
All good.
Good,
All good,
well
thank you.
done. Well done.
I'd say we've been busier than expected. I'm not sure that an underlying shortage of property just disappears just because of 10 weeks of lockdown. And I think people paused, waited to see what was going to happen. Of course, there's going to be a huge economic output from this, but the actual underlying demand is still there. We've seen an increase in owner-occupied demand on our completed developments where you can get help to buy from the government. Money's incredibly cheap.
Yes.
Interest rates have been crumbling, so money's quite cheap to borrow. And also, if you're an investor, you're going to go with the old adage of investing in bricks and mortar rather than leaving it to decrease in value in the banks.
Nationwide this, or specifically in London, would you say, David?
Well, Zoopla are suggesting it's pretty much nationwide. We've seen strong interest in London and the home counties, together with our scheme in Birmingham, for example, which, to be fair, hasn't abated. We've seen similar sales, and that's a product that's selling off plan. So to sell that within current government guidelines obviously hasn't been too difficult because there's nothing to see anyway.
Yes.
The interesting thing is that as soon as the lockdown began to be eased, we started to get increased volume of people that actually want to view properties. So the team have been out there doing openings for them, opening the door and let them go in.
I see. Okay. And what do you and your senior colleagues put that down to then? That once the lockdown started to ease, people started to say, right, let's go viewing these properties. What's that down to, David?
You know what? So it's always been said that the various portals, Zoopla and Rightmove, and even our own website, the busiest days for it, Christmas Day and Boxing Day, people are at home, they've got their new tablets, they've got their new laptops, they're bored, they've listened to the Queen's speech.
There was relatives they don't like.
Something like that. You know, it's been the same, isn't it, during lockdown? I think people are pleased to see other people. And so people have been searching for properties, looking for new stuff, looking around their own house and thinking, actually, maybe I'd like something with a garden, because if this happens again, what am I going to do? So there's definitely an interest there.
All right, David, thank you. David Gallman, Sales Director of Galliard Homes, giving us the background to that story. We'll come back to our conversation concerning the idea of those fines, which unfortunately you're not going to get your cash back, and also the impact, of course, this growing revolt on the Conservatives. Also coming up after the news, Formula gone, jobs to go at McLaren, and they're toughening up the furlough scheme. Rishi Sunak announcing it earlier this month.
Until the end of July, there will be no changes whatsoever. Then from August to October, the scheme will continue for all sectors and regions of the UK,
but restrictions coming into place, so you might have to move fast. 7:30, you're listening to Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrara, here on LBC. News time, Simon Conway.
The Health Secretary has raised the prospect of some areas of England going into local lockdowns if they see a flare-up of coronavirus cases. Matt Hancock says the ability to tighten restrictions regionally will be part of the NHS test, track and trace system. The government's clarified there will not be a formal review of fines handed to people who've travelled for childcare reasons during lockdown. Mr Hancock had said he would look into the issue following the row over the Prime Minister's advisor Dominic Cummings and his trip to Durham. Boris Johnson's called for an independent inquiry into the origins of the coronavirus outbreak. Downing Street says he made the comments in a telephone call to the head of the World Health Organization. Premier League clubs will vote later on whether to reintroduce contact training. It means players will be allowed to tackle during practice ahead of a planned return to matches in mid-June. And the weather, cloudy at times for Northern Ireland and Scotland with some rain later. Elsewhere, largely sunny and very warm, a high of 25 degrees.
Eddie Mayer, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m.
Looking at important decisions that were made when facts were known already. Postcodes surrounding Cheltenham Racecourse have had the highest number of